We tend to think of ancient mythology as something akin to modern fantasy or even scripture. There might be some variations from book to book, but the core always remains the same. So maybe Gandalf in the books is a little different than Gandalf as portrayed in the Lord of the Rings movies, but he's still playing the same role. But really, mythology is more flexible than that. One land's mother of beasts with 100 breasts is another land's sexless Artemis who will kill a man just for seeing her naked. Heck, one city's humble maiden goddess with clever hands is another city's patroness of war and wisdom. It's a little more DC Comics than Four Gospels, at least in terms of variety. So it should come as no surprise that something as important to Greek mythology as the land of the dead, known as Hades, comes in a lot of different forms across different traditions. What we typically consider canon is a place with no escape. All mortal souls go there and are ranked according to their deeds in life, but even the great Achilles, in his form as a shade, reports that he would rather spend one day as a slave below the sun of the surface than rule as king below. Of course, that's a little pessimistic for most people, and those searching for a more hopeful view on what happens after death often turned to mystery cults and special sects that would promise some kind of rebirth after death. One of the most unique and mysterious is called Orphism. Hello and welcome. I'm Zilla, and this is my Athenaeum. Today I want to talk about Orphic mythology, what it is, how it differs from what we usually think of as Greek mythology, and how the video game Hades made me laugh so hard I nearly fell off my seat. If you grew up with what is commonly viewed as Greek mythology, then you probably have an idea that their world is set up something like this. Once upon a time, the sky, Uranos, fell in love with the earth, Gaia. They had many children, but Uranos didn't like his children, so he shut them back inside the earth. She was rather unhappy, and taught her son Kronos to make a blade. When Uranos came back to Gaia, Kronos leapt out and killed his father. Then Kronos and his fellow Titans were freed, and they ruled the earth and heavens for a long time. But Kronos, knowing how easy it was to fall to a powerful child, grew scared of his own offspring, and ate them all up. His wife Rhea tricked him by giving him a stone in swaddling cloth instead of his youngest son Zeus. Then Zeus killed his father, freeing his siblings to rule as the Olympian gods. But the displaced Titans weren't super happy, so they fought a big war. Zeus and the Olympians won, and he and his brothers, Poseidon and Hades, each took a realm as their own. Zeus the sky, Poseidon the sea, and Hades the underworld. Then there are stories of heroes and mortals and demigods and all sorts of things, mostly Zeus dicking around. But the one that's relevant to us today is the story of the birth and ascension of Dionysus. Zeus took a mortal woman, Semele, as a lover. Semele's wicked sisters convinced her that she'd been tricked by a man pretending to be Zeus, and told her to ask for proof of his true form. Zeus found that she had become pregnant, and granted her a boon of her choice. She asked to see his true form, and bound by his word, Zeus turned into a giant lightning bolt and fried her to a crisp. The demigod fetus, however, survived, so Zeus sewed him into his own thigh as a makeshift womb. From there Dionysus was born. Dionysus was so clearly Olympian, like his father, that they wanted to give him a seat among the gods. But that would make an unlucky 13 seats on Olympus, so the goddess Hestia ceded her place for him. Don't worry, though. Hestia was the goddess of the hearth, and she had a place at the center of every Greek household. We may not know enough to give her her proper due today, but they certainly did. So then, what is Orphism, and what does it have to do with all that? Like I mentioned before, Orphism is a sect that uses a different version of this mythology, and in particular they're very focused on the afterlife, death, and rebirth. In Orphic mythology, the war with the Titans didn't start with Kronos' infantophagia. Instead, it starts when Hera gets jealous of Dionysus' elevation to Olympus. She bribes the Titans to kill Dionysus, and they take him and rend him limb from limb, in some versions even consuming him. This kicks off the war, which the gods win, and the Titans are generally burnt to ash. Athena is able to save Dionysus' heart, and this is what's sewn into Zeus's leg to be reborn as the Olympian Dionysus. The rest of him, whether part of those ashes or bones left over, is mixed with the earth and rises again as mortal. So mortals in Orphism are the remains of the divine, totally insensible to that nature and working through trying to refine the connection. But unless they practice Orphism and find the way to ascend, they're doomed to repeat this cycle of death and rebirth until they can't sustain the connection anymore. This metempsychosis, or returning of the soul, might be a bit reminiscent of the Buddhist or Hindu concept of samsara, but unlike samsara, which has no end, there are two distinct ending possibilities for a practitioner of the Orphic tenets. Either you succeed in rejoining with your divine aspect and are elevated to the realm of gods and heroes, or you are condemned among the shades of Hades to forget even your mortality through the waters of Lethe, or forgetfulness. And they had practical ideas of what to do if you should find yourself dead. We have the remains of golden plaques bearing instructions like, when you come to the fountain of Lethe, turn around to the right and say this prescribed prayer for Mnemosune, the waters of memory, instead. I should note here that golden plaques are not a common thing for this time period and place. We really don't see them in any other context, so Orphics are a pretty unique group. Orphism is so called because it was supposedly started by the hero poet Orpheus, one of the few mortals in Greek mythology to make the journey all the way down into the underworld and return to the surface unharmed. His story, in brief, is that on his wedding day, his wife-to-be was accidentally killed. In his grief, he played so hard that he opened the path all the way down to an audience with the king and queen of the realm below. The queen, Persephone, wept at his grief and persuaded her husband Hades to make a bargain. The condition was that Orpheus could have his beloved back if he could make it all the way back up to the surface world on foot with no help and never turning back. Orpheus agreed and started, but it was a long and grueling journey, and after a time he started to doubt. He couldn't hear his beloved. She did not speak. She did not respond to him. In fact, he couldn't hear footfalls behind him or any kind of breathing, and eventually his doubts got the better of him, and he turned, only to see her ripped back to the depths of Hades. Orpheus then lived a long life, withdrawn from both humanity and the gods, singing to the animals and controlling them with his music. He did occasionally participate in other heroes' journeys, and eventually, in most versions, he dies torn apart by Maenads, the female frenzied worshippers of Dionysus. Of course, in some versions, he doesn't actually die, but his head lives on, singing, eternally parted from his beloved. You can see how these myths of sparagmos, or being torn into pieces, in association with both Dionysus and Orpheus and maybe some kind of rebirth, can get kind of mixed up and rearranged, yes? Oh, and I've forgotten to mention one crucial detail about the Orphic myths. The practice of Orphic rituals and the plaques that I mentioned date as far back as the 6th century BCE, but we don't have any mention of anyone calling him Dionysus until at least the 3rd century BCE, and not provably until the 1st century CE. The god's name was Zagreus, and he was the son of Persephone. Those of you who have played the video game Hades have by now understood why I bring it up. In that game, you play as the character Zagreus, son of Persephone, battling up from the underworld, only to die over and over and over again. Along the way, you meet Orpheus, who's taken up a position as court musician to the court of Hades in the underworld. And you also interact with the various Olympian gods, who not only give you aid in your quest to reach the surface, but also share stories and tidbits and definitely gossip. And once, just once, Dionysus says this.
Hey Zach, you ever see a fellow by the name of Orpheus down there? You ever heard of him? I bet you have. And I have had a funny thought, a little jest that maybe we could try, if you'd be up to have a little harmless fun.
Harmless fun at the expense of Orpheus? You have my full and complete attention, Dionysus, mate.
That chap comes up with the most smashing songs, so I was thinking maybe we could spin him into tall tales, something like how maybe you and I, like, we're connected or something. He'll buy it. Tell him for me, yeah?
And indeed, for the rest of the game, at various points, Orpheus can be heard in the court of Hades singing these lyrics.
Born of Zeus as a serpent, in spite of Queen Hera, Zagreus came, torn to shreds by the Titans, devoured in pieces from his altar flame. The seed of Dionysus grew.
Keep learning, friends.